Alright, so it's finally an opportunity for me to show you some of the tips and tricks that I use when I do wildlife photography. In this particular setting, I'm going to give some strategies, but I'm also going to talk about, in general, some of the strategies that I use. So, first of all, one thing that I like to do is I like to keep my camera right here. I've got a jacket with a really strong zipper, and then what I use is the tripod collar for my lens. And I put it in this position such that I can anchor it here. Then I have a strap, of course, for extra security around my neck. Now, why here? The point is speed. How quickly can I get on a particular animal and take a photo, especially if the wildlife is quick moving, hard to see, might only have 5 seconds to get this wildlife shot. So in these cases, I need to be very quick. I learned a lot of this in the Belarusian forest, Naliboki forest. How quickly you had to move. Wolves would be there for like 2 seconds and you had to capture it. So I know that there are some manufacturers that have like a side clip here and you can pull the camera off. I actually found this less cumbersome and more efficient. So for example, if I'm in a field ready to go, I might fully extend out if I'm not doing too much, like too difficult or too heavy of walking where I could damage the lens. If I'm just straight walking or I'm stationary in a place, I'm going to extend the lens all the way out and I'll take the cap off and I'll keep the cap somewhere like this, always keeping the lens pointed down. So if I see an animal over there, I need to be this fast. Got it. So that's the kind of speed that I'm looking for. And this gives me that ability to have it right here, ready to go. Now the question is, if I'm this fast, how do I know my settings are correct? So let's talk about settings for a few minutes. For settings, first thing you always want to do is do test shots. Lots of test shots, especially as the light changes. So often wildlife is most active in the early morning and in the evening. So that sort of golden hour that photographers are familiar with. So it's important maybe at the first hour of sunrise and the last hour of sunset to be checking your photos maybe every, I would say, check your settings every 10 minutes at least, maybe 5 minutes. Do a test shot, make sure that the settings are what you want them to be. What you want your settings to be, of course, is a very personal choice and it depends on the photographer and their style and their strategies. In this particular environment, where I know the snow leopard is going to be far away, and I know that I've got good daylight today, and I know that I've got bright snow reflecting the light. In this case, I'm going to make sure that my aperture, my f-stop, is jacked up really high so that the depth of field is much longer and I can have a greater probability of getting the snow leopard in focus. And so I'm rocking a f-stop of at least f10, f12, or even higher right now, just to make sure that I have a better chance of getting something in focus. Anyway, in the mornings, I'm making adjustments all the time to my shutter speed, my ISO, and my aperture, and checking it every 5 to 10 minutes to make sure that when it's time to pull this out and be ready, that I actually have my settings accurately set. Now let's talk about something else. Most professional photographers like aperture priority. As a wildlife photographer, I think that's really taking too big of a risk. With aperture priority, shutter speed is out of your control. So in those low light situations, you're going to have a slow shutter speed and the animal is going to be blurred. So as a wildlife photographer, it's so important for me to shoot in manual because I need to control all of the settings. The ISO, the aperture, the shutter speed, sometimes white balance, the bracketing, metering, etc. I have to really be aware of all of those settings and control them. I don't want to give the computer within the camera the option to make the decisions for me, especially if it means a blurred photo of an animal. Alright, so the next thing to talk about is stabilizing your camera, especially something like this where the lens is super heavy and can really put a drain or a strain on you through the day. I'm going to be out here at least 10 hours today, and so holding this up that entire time is not a reasonable option. So let's talk about some ways in which you can stabilize the camera or your shot in general. So the first strategy that a lot of people talk about is using the strap itself and pushing it against your neck. What happens is it stabilizes the shot, especially if you're doing video or even if you're doing photos. You can do live screen mode on your display here, and push this out and take a photo that way. That will put a bit of a strain on you as you're having to push out and hold up at the same time. So that's something that's just for short spurts of time, especially with a large lens like this. The next one that most photographers know about is to use your arm as the brace up against your waist. So setting it like this, that way you also have your fingers here to adjust the focus as you need to. So this is another standard option. Here's a strategy I use out here in this space. Given that we're all often looking up at the mountains, one thing that I like to do is I like to set my backpack down. I don't have anything too valuable in there that can break. And I'm going to set myself up like this, lay down against the backpack, put my knee up, and now I can rest the camera, or the lens rather, right on top of my knee and stabilize it. In this position, I can look at the entire range, and I could be here for 2 hours. I have enough layers of clothing where the snow doesn't bother me, and if it does bother me, I can just clear a space for me. But the idea is stabilization and comfort the entire time while I'm trying to capture the snow leopard. Another approach is the shotgun approach. So I'm going to take this strap off my neck, attach it to my hand. Don't want it sliding off of the cliff here. I'm going to set it here between my knees. Flip up my display. Some of you might have a twist out display. Either way, that's fine. And from live mode, shoot like this. This is really comfortable, especially if I have something supporting my back that I can lean against. Right now it's not as comfortable. I have to use some of my core. But if I were to support myself a little bit with my bag, it would work. This shotgun approach is really nice because it's very stable. It's a bit limited in how much I can move around, but I can always adjust my body for that. So these are some of the strategies that you can use for stabilizing the camera. Of course, you can go full on flat mode, which I've done sometimes as well. Straight down like this. And in this position, you could be like this for hours. I would use my elbow to brace it like this and just be scanning and taking shots accordingly. So one of the things that I like to do when I'm shooting is shoot a continuous high. Continuous high gives me the opportunity to capture as many shots as possible, as long as my buffer can handle all of those shots. And so I'm just going to hold down the shutter and get as many shots as I can, especially if it's this one moment to catch a snow leopard in action. I might only have 10 total seconds for the snow leopard. Continuous high is really the only mode that makes sense then for wildlife in this instance. The other thing I want to talk about is back button focus. There's tons of information online about this, but as a wildlife photographer, this is a game changer. You need to assign one of your back buttons as your focus and divorce it from your shutter. So it's so important to make sure that the back button focus is what is assigned to the focus, and that the front main button is for your shutter. And so the reason why is I can press this button down, the back button focus, lock my focus, and be scanning around, and at any point in time I can go ahead and engage the shutter and take my photos. And by engaging the shutter, I'm not in any way impacting the actual focus of the shot. Whereas if you're waiting for an animal, your finger's hovering over the shutter, you might accidentally let up after you've locked your focus. In which case, when you press down, your camera's going to hunt for focus again, and you may have lost the shot because it may be out of focus. Or you do not have it focused, you just have your hand up above the shutter, and then as you press down again, it hunts. It doesn't give you the photo that you want in the focus that you want. So by using this back button focus, really separates the two processes and allows you to focus, and then at any point in time, go ahead and engage the shutter and take the photo. So it's really important to keep this back button focus assigned for focus only. Your camera will have specifications for this. Look it up in your user manual or look it up online. Live view is something I want to talk about. Of course, it will drain your battery at a faster rate. There's both camera and video options for most cameras, and I find that it's useful often to use live view because I need to get my camera in a position where it's away from my eye itself, for a better angle, let's say, or maybe I need to start zoomed out and focus in while looking at other periphery elements, so the live view can be really helpful in this regard. So a lot of people use that. In this particular setting, it's not as useful. So I find myself almost never using live view because everything is so far away. It sort of defeats the purpose of trying to use live view. Quality. Now I want to talk about the quality of the images that you choose. This is up to you. This is the photographer's preference. My buffer on my Nikon D750 is decent. It's good enough to where I can shoot both RAW and fine JPEG simultaneously. And so some of you are like, why do you want a JPEG? Well, if I don't have enough time for post-processing with my RAW images and I need to get something out right away, I can use those JPEGs. For example, right when I get back from this trip, I have a presentation right away. I don't have time before that presentation to sit down and do all my post-processing in Lightroom, even with presets. And so for me to be able to grab the JPEG, maybe do it 1 or 2 quick touch-ups in Photoshop and use it in a presentation is effective for me. So for me, it makes sense to both preserve a quality artifact, the RAW image, and also the JPEG at the same time. It's up to you. It's up to what your buffer can handle on your camera. Test it out. Hold down your shutter continuously and see how many shots you can roll out with each setting, and then make your decision. If you're really good at tracking wildlife and you feel confident that what your buffer can handle for RAW plus fine JPEG is going to be sufficient, that you'll still get the shots you need, then do it. If you're not so confident about that, maybe shoot only RAW or shoot RAW plus basic, or just shoot in JPEG if that's what you're familiar with and comfortable with.